good afternoon to everyone. I am Isabela Ruiz,
And I'm Juan Andres.
and following, we're gonna make a book review about SlaughterHouse-5, written by Kurt Vonnegut. The first part of this book review is gonna be analyze the critical and different elements from the story, as the plot, the characters, the theme, and the setting of the book itself.
Now, then, we're going to describe the author's narrative style, such as the use of the literary styles, such as the metaphors, the imagery, the symbols, and the symbolism, and finally, the type of narrator of what Kurt Vonnegut is. That is going to be talked by me. Then,
The third point is to analyze the main elements and icons of science fiction genre.
also, we're going to talk about the philosophical postmodernism in the book, and finally, both of us are going to talk about our opinion of the book. Hope you enjoy the video, and let's start.
Thank you.
So we're gonna start by analyzing the book itself. SlaughterHouse-5 is written by Kurt Vonnegut and was published in 1969. The book is considered to be a science fiction anti-war book. And why is this? Because Kurt Vonnegut used different themes as the ones of World War II and created a new character that's called Billy Pilgrim. This character experienced many things. He was a soldier from the American Army, and he was fighting with the United States and the Allied countries to defeat Germany. While he was in the war, he assisted the Battle of the Bulge, and there he was captured and became a prisoner of war. In that moment, he also experienced the Dresden bombing. While he was there, he experienced many mental disorders, and he started to create this new world called Tralfamadore with these creatures, really weird creatures called Tralfamadorians. In addition, we wanted to make a really short comparison between Kurt Vonnegut and Billy Pilgrim. As you may know, Kurt Vonnegut also served in the army for the Americans in the World War II. He was also in the Dresden bombing, and after the Dresden bombing, he also experienced mental disorders, which is exactly the same as Billy Pilgrim and what happened to him. So it's really interesting how Kurt Vonnegut uses his story, his own life story, to portray it into Billy Pilgrim's life.
Okay, and finally, we're going to talk about the theme of the story. There were four mainly themes that were warfare, time, free will, and freedom. So first, with warfare, as you may know, the story is mainly around of the Second World War. It mainly talks about the battle of the Allies with the German of the Nazis, and it's like all this type of the Second World War. Second, the time, as the story is based on the time traveling of Billy. He's always like time traveling to the Second War, to events of his life, and all of that. Then the free will is the free will of the people. Billy mentioned of having the free will of change of time, like as he time travels to the past and the future, he can like change the time. So is that free will? Also, what the Tralfamadorians mention about the free will of the humans, that is the free will the humans have to create a war, like they want to create a war, they create a war due to the ideologists. And finally, the freedom. Well, as you may know, Billy was a prisoner of war, so is that topic, that concept of freedom he didn't have throughout the whole story. He was like the prisoner of war. He was always captured by the Germans, and that's the four main themes of the story. And now let's hope on the symbols, the metaphors, the imagery, symbolism. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the author's narrative styles, the use of figures of speech, and the type of narrator he is. So first, the metaphor. The metaphor is a figure of speech in which a word or a phrase is applied to an object or an action to which it is not literally applicable. So I'm going to show two quotes in the screen to show an evidence of how he used metaphor in the story. Second, he used similes, that is a figure of speech involving the comparison of one thing with another thing of a different kind, used to make a description more emphatic or vivid. well, the two quotes in the screen, and then imagery that is a visual descriptive or figurative language, especially in a literary work. Two quotes, and there is the present of the story. Now, finally, we're going to talk about the type of narrator Vonnegut is. So, in the first and the last chapter of the book, he's a first person. He's the protagonist in the book because he's mainly talk about his life and the research he want to make about Dresden, and that's when he involved Billy Pilgrim into his story. So in the first and the last chapter, he's in first person. Then in the rest of the story, in the rest of the chapters, he's the third person, an omniscient third person, because he knows like all the feelings and the emotion of the characters. And he's described in that story of Billy living in the Second War with the Transformadorians and the time traveling he makes. Now we're going to present the icons of science fiction and the postmodern philosophy presented in the book. So there are three main icons of science fiction in the book. I'm going to mention two, and my partner Isabella is going to mention the other one. So firstly, the aliens, that's one of the icons of science fiction, that are the Transformadorians that are presented in the book. When Billy like presented them and how the Transformadorians like implement their philosophy into him. Next, the planets. In one part of the story, Billy mentioned the Transformador planet and how he was in a zoo, like an animal with another woman that was Montana, a moving actress. So he present like this Transformador planet that is one of the icons of science fiction. And then, well, my partner Isabella is going to mention time travel.
Following the elements and icons of science fiction genre, we want to talk about a really important theme that Kurt Vonnegut used throughout his book, which is time travel. Billy Pilgrim experienced many traumatizing things in war and many mental disorders, which led him to create new creatures and new worlds as the Transformador and Transformadorians. Here are some quotes from the book. Chapter 2, page 23. Billy Pilgrim has come unstuck in time. Billy is static in time, has no control over where he is going next, and the trips aren't necessarily fun. He's a constant state of stage fright, he says, because he never knows what part of his life he's going to have to act next. So here he is explaining that he doesn't know what part of his life he's going to act next. As it was a script, as his life was a script and his life was a movie, and he needed to know which part he needs to keep on next. That's really strange. Another quote is from chapter 2, page 26. The most important thing I learned on Transformador was that when a person dies, he only appears to die. He's still very much alive in the past, so it is very silly for people to cry at his funeral. All moments, past, present, and future, always have existed, always will exist. So he again talks about the Transformador world and where he again was and what he learned there. So he starts to talk about these people, these creatures that aren't real, because he is just unstuck in time because of all what he passed through while he was a prisoner of war in World War II.
So now we're going to talk about how the postmodern philosophy is presented in the book. There are different ideas that make the evidence of how Vonnegut used this philosophy into his book. The first is using like mainly the scientific beliefs, not like nature beliefs. So he uses the scientific beliefs as a tool for achieving a greater human happiness rather than uses this nature of reality. So in the book we can see that he used like the scientific thing of the time traveling and the scientific idea of the aliens and all of that rather than use like a nature thing, like something spontaneous that happens. Then the other ideal is that there is no universal truth. There are many truths. So in this case, there is not like an individual perception. Each one of the people use like their own truth, as you may see. Vonnegut in his story has, or Billy in the story show his his ideal of the Transformadorians, so how of his perception about death and life.
As we keep talking about the postmodern philosophy, we also find ourselves with another philosophical term, which is deconstruction. As it says, deconstruction involves reading a text to ferret out its hidden or multiple meanings, as polysemy. In this way, a reader's interpretation of the text becomes more important than the text itself. Also significant is the subjectivity of the reader in determining what the author intends to say. So in this part, what it means is how you interpret the book, what you think about the book. For our case, we think that Billy Pilgrim is a crazy person, maybe a lunatic, we don't know, that creates many different things and that doesn't have a clear path of his life. In addition, there is another philosophical term that keeps on going with the deconstruction. The reader is creating the meaning of the text. She also constructs the world according to the culture and experiences the reader has. In other words, there is no real world. Only 6 billion, approximately, constructions of the world, a belief known as anti-realism. So this philosophical definition tries to explain that there are not just one definition for a book, in this case SlaughterHouse-five. There are many definitions and many ways in which we can determine and understand this book. Some people may say that it's a really interesting book and it portrays what happens to soldiers in real life, that when they attend to a war and come back, they have mental disorders and are not the same persons as they were before. But others may say that is a really crazy thing, that you don't become so lunatic and start to think about different creatures, about different things that are not real. Okay guys, you have reached the last part of the book review. You guys want to know what Juan Andres and I think about the book? We think it's a good book, it's written in a good way, but still it's a little bit difficult to understand the chronological order of the book, the chronological events of the book. It's a little difficult to understand and to analyze what is the main conflict of the book and how are the events occurring. Because as you saw in the review, well, the whole book is written in disorder, explaining how Billy Pilgrim passed from one epoch to the other and how he started to describe all the things that he started to imagine in his head. So if you want to read a book that's a little different from the normal and a very interesting book by itself, well, you should read it. Or maybe try to talk with someone that has written also. And if you want to, well, read it. It doesn't take you much time. Thank you, and we hope you liked it. Bye.